Okay.
Oh, I forgot to turn off my little banner here. Okay. Happy Friday, everybody. They were trying something new with our startup here. Anyway, I'm here with our total traffic and conversion collaborators, Betty Withrow and Roy Dickett, and our special guest, Russell Lukadu. And we're going to talk about DISC today and in the context of building HR teams, building teams, business environment. So maybe, Betty, you can introduce your guest here.
Sure. I'm happy to introduce Russell, Greg. I met Russell in a networking and mastermind and saw his presentation and instantly invited him to come here because he knows his stuff. It's about DISC, and I'll let Russell tell you more. It's DISC. I know that DISC is brilliant because I learned about it from a couple of different sources a few years ago, and seeing his presentation was a great refresher and brings you right up to date. And it's quick and economical. And so, welcome, Russell. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Ready to get started then. Let me just jump right in. And the presentation was originally given in a network referral group. And so it's focused on sales, adaptive communication. But what you'll see is this teaches you how to adapt to your audience so that your communication is successful. So who is this guy, Russell Lukadu? First off, he has the most unusual last name and company name that makes it impossible to get emails. rlukadu at hrarchitecture.biz. But I've been doing what I do since Ronald Reagan was president. When I first started in HR, I've been on my own for nearly 2 decades. Before that, I worked in 3 Fortune 500 companies, city government, and a small manufacturer. But I grew up in the small business world. My father ran a bicycle shop with all of us working in it. And I watched my dad struggle being a small business owner because we couldn't take vacations without having somebody fill in. But anyway, been working with small businesses for 20 years to try to help align their team with their dream. What are we talking about today? We're talking about what I call adaptive communication. That refers to the ability for the sender to adapt their communication style to their audience. Why would we want to do that? Well, why do you want to communicate? It doesn't matter what it is you're trying to communicate. Your message needs to be received. Do you want more sales? Do you want better relationships? Do you want better employees? The DISC profile is a great screening tool for hiring, but we're talking about today about how we use it in communications. If you want more sales, you need to learn to adapt your communication to your audience. How do you do that? You need to be aware, mindful of the cultural background, the experience background, and the communication styles of the people you're trying to talk to. At the United Nations, there's probably as many as 150 different languages spoken. And one of the biggest things they have to do is called simultaneous translation. Now, communicating between people speaking the same language is easier, but they actually have sub-languages that they use to communicate. It's as if we had an interpreter in our ears when we learn how to size up who we're talking to and change what it is we're talking about. It's not easily said and done. How do you do that? Well, communication is taking individual knowledge and merging the two knowledge bases according to Critical Crucial Conversations so that the two parties communicating share knowledge. That's the goal. Now, the problem is that we send messages and we receive messages. One of my premises is 100% of the responsibility for the message is on the hands of the sender, not the receiver. And why do I say that so definitively? Well, if you send an email out and you misspell rlukadu at hrarchitecture.biz and I don't get the email, or you put .com or .net, the email didn't get received. If I dial the wrong number, the call doesn't go through. You have to know how to get in touch with the people you're talking about. So those are technological barriers, but the same thing occurs with interpersonal communication. So what if we knew what language the other person was? And I'll show you what I mean by language, because there's 4 different communication languages within each English, Spanish, French, what have you. 4 individual styles of receiving and sending communication. When you can think about what that other person, how they want to receive the information, you're going to be successful. There's 3 steps here. First, you have to know your communication style. What do you prefer? What do you do? And how is that being received by the people who need to hear what you have to say? You know yourself. If you do a DISC profile with me, you get these 2 pages. There's a checklist of how you like to communicate and be communicated with, and how you don't want to be communicated with. Well, when you understand yourself and then you begin to apply these concepts to other people, you can create, and I'll show you an actual checklist where we'll build a checklist of how you adapt your communication so that you're heard. Understanding others is the key here. And being able to make that connection and unwinding their brain so that your message gets through is critical. So I use the DISC profile. Betty mentioned that she's found it very useful and very successful. And again, I've been using it for over 20 years. And my vendor uses a DISC profile that's been validated as non-discriminatory impact. You can get free DISC profiles off the internet. Buyer beware, you get what you pay for. So when you're looking at the DISC profile, you know the D, I, S, and C is what DISC spells. Direct, influence, system, and compliance are the 4 areas. So I think I can play sound here. I haven't tried this. So let me play this little short video, which gives you, if it'll advance, there we go. Let's, if you can't hear the video, please stop me and let me know if the video is going to play now. There we go.
There are some things that we can never escape, like your true hardwired behavioral style. Consider how different people take an elevator, for instance. You're looking to go.
Sorry about that.
There are some things that we can never escape, like your true hardwired behavioral style. Consider how different people take an elevator, for instance. You're looking to go to the 15th floor, and the elevator door is closing. You see a person pressing a button. At first, you think they are pressing the open button. But the D style is actually pressing the close because they don't have time to wait for you. Another time, you get to the elevator and have this friendly conversation with the I style about how terrific day you are both having, and you make plans to have coffee with your new friend. And then there is the S style, a person who smiles and nods at you politely, a quiet person who makes those elevator journeys a little more relatable and puts you at ease. The most famous one of them all might be the C style, who is looking around quietly and discreetly thinking, we have 10 people in this elevator. I estimate we are 150 pounds over the 1,500 pound weight limit, which is against the rules and might get us into trouble. He calmly hits the button to get off the elevator, to wait for an elevator that is less crowded and within the guidelines. DISC styles can be identified if you just observe. Extended DISC assessments measure.
That's the key word. I want to cut off before their commercial. Hopefully you guys heard that. I didn't get interrupted. So observing other people and putting them in their DISC style is the bridge to communicating in their language. Now, population-wise, about the most common DISC style is the S. And you heard about the S. They're comfortable. They're about systems. They're about fluidity, continuation, loyalty. That's the largest population. The second largest population are the interpersonal influencers. The next most prevalent style is the D, but the least prevalent style is the C at 14%. So the likelihood you're going to encounter if you're working with business owners, the vast majority of them are red or Ds or yellow or Is. Although you do have some business owners across this pie chart. So let's talk about how you observe and identify where these people are, and then we'll tell you how you adapt. These are common. These are what I call archetypical high Ds. LeBron James, James T. Kirk, Stephen Jobs, Serena Williams, Gordon Ramsay. They're to the point. They get it, the decision made. But we'll talk about how that looks like and how you observe that. So you might want to think about these these celebrity high Ds when we're talking about these styles. When you're meeting a high D, watch for nonverbal cues. They exude confidence. They're going to be in the center of the room. They want to lead other people and control and get to the results. They're impatient. They're decisive. They lean forward non-verbally. They invade your space. They will face you straight on. When you look for verbal cues for a high D, they use I and me or change. They're about the what. They talk about results, not process, not quality, not people. What do you want? In fact, when you make a phone call to an unknown high D, if you're doing any cold calling, they almost always pick up as soon as it rings. If they wait for the ring to finish, they're to the point. They say a few words. They'll end the call very quickly and subtly, but they want to know. They'll answer the phone. Hi, this is Russell. What do you want? That fast. So you listen for these things. You watch for these things. Now let's go down the chart to the bottom right-hand wheel and talk about the influencers. These are interpersonal. They like to get themselves into the conversation. Angelina Jolie, Jimmy Kimmel, Taylor Swift, Kelly Ripa, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Dick Vitale. These are people that are just overwhelmingly personal and want you to know who they are. I mentioned, let me go back a couple slides. The high D avatar for me is the lion. The high I is the otter. Everybody likes otters. They're fun. We like to watch them. You go to the zoo, that's usually the kid's favorite. That and the elephant for some reason. But high Ds are enthusiastic. They're friendly. They're in front. They're not apart. They want to be part of that conversation. They want to be in the group. They may invade your space. They may want to get closer to you. However, they're inattentive to details. They like the attention, but they don't want it to be distracted. Non-verbal cues, they use us and we. They're interactive, demonstrative. Yes, yes, yes. Tell me more. Tell me more. They share their feelings. This feels great. They talk a lot, and they'll ask about who all needs to be involved, who needs to be here. Do we have the right people? When you're talking to a high I, the otter on the phone, they're also going to be quick to pick up because they want to be in that conversation. They'll apologize if it's longer than one ring because they're positive. They want to make sure you're comfortable. Easy pace. They'll ask questions about you. Steadiness. Let's look at the high S down in that bottom left-hand corner. We're talking about Brad Pitt. We're talking about Aaron Rodgers, Scarlett Johansson, John Stockton, and Carrie Underwood. They're likable, they're loyal, they're supportive, and they're predictable. I think Carrie Underwood could record the birthday song and sell 1 million copies as well as Taylor Swift because they've got it down. The high S's, they're patient, they're predictable, they're steady, they rely on what's happened before, and they avoid change. That's the downside. They will lean in, but inobtrusively. They share their feelings, as I said. They prefer to listen, so they might not talk as much. The high I's and the high D's are going to control the conversation. The high S's are going to lean back and listen more, focus on the team. Their question is how. What for the high D, who for the high I, how for the high S. When a high S, you make a phone call to and the Labrador Retriever is my icon for this. They're slow to pick up the phone. They want to finish their thought. They'll pick up the phone. They will be limited emotion, but they'll speak deliberately. And they'll say, what do you need for next? They'll ask process questions. Now let's talk about the fourth group, the high C's. The high C's, Neil deGrasse Tyson, James Franco, Bill Belichick, Andrea Huffington, Martha Stewart, Howie Mandel. These people are about rules and regulations and process and tightness. These are the facts. The high C's in a nonverbal way, they're going to be logical, perfectionist, detail-oriented. They'll be realistic. They will lean and they will not be part of the group. So if you look in a group, the high C's are the ones in the back of the room. Verbal cues, they're attentive, but they're quiet. They hide their feelings. It's really, really hard to read a high C. That's one of the signs of a high C. They want to know facts. They want to know the analysis. They want to know the instructions. They're about the why. They'll ask, why are we talking about this? When you call a high C, they'll also be slow to pick up the phone. They're skeptical. They'll ask a question before answering a question, or they'll repeat your question, and then they'll respond with facts. The high C and the high S's share the fact, don't ask them to make a decision on the spot. So the third step after knowing yourself, knowing what your audience is, being able to read that, is you want to adapt. Now, I used to have a sailboat, and I learned the hard way, you cannot sail directly into the wind. You have to create a tacking strategy so that you shift so that you're not going into the opposing wind. It's the same thing with communication. So when you're communicating to a high D, you do want to be to the point, stick to business, be prepared, be very prepared, and come to a conclusion with action steps that support the bottom line. What you don't want to do is be irrelevant, be flippant, be disorganized. Offer options, not solutions. You want to be able to get that high D to the point. When I'm presenting a presentation to a high D, I will put something on the back page that said, here's the conclusion. Now read the rest of the report, because they'll open the last page of the report first. So that's the way you need to approach them, knowing they're going to get to the point now. The high I adaptations, what you need to do to communicate to that otter, be warm, be friendly, talk about feeling questions, ask about their weekend, ask about their family, ask about the business in general. Present options. Don't tell a high D anything. Bring them to the answer. So what you don't want to do, though, is be curt, cold, to the point. Opposite with a high D. You need to be friendly. But you don't want to. You want to be friendly and edge into it. But you also don't want to hide information or appear to dishonest or deceitful, because eyes have been burned by being too gullible. The high S's, the retriever. Schedule the time to talk with them. High S's do not like cold callers. If you can send an email, get in touch with them ahead of time, get a plan, send out a calendar link so they are planning to talk to you. Begin with a personal question. Break the ice a little bit. They're about relationships. Present the case non-threatening and softly. Present an agenda with options, but tell them where you're going before you give it to them. So you say, I'm going to talk about this, and at the end of the meeting, we'll do this. Laying out your overall agenda with a high S is a secret to getting them on board from the start. Give them options like the high I, and give them a follow-up time for the close. Don't rush on head on to business. Don't control the pace. Let them drive. Don't be domineering or demanding. And whatever you do, don't ask a high S to make a decision on the spot. That's how you will lose a sale to a high S. Let's talk about the beaver, the high C's. They're the busy beavers. They're down, their heads down. They're getting their work done. So you want to be prepared. You want to stick to business. You want to be very accurate. If you have a flaw, like a typo in front of a high C, they'll pick up on it and you'll lose them. You want to present multiple informations followed up with a pro-con chart or an evaluation of the options. Have a rationale of how you came to that conclusion and show them how it's going to minimize their risk. Because that's what high C's are about, like the guy that got off the heavy elevator. Don't be giddy or casual. Don't push too hard. Don't ignore their questions, because they will immediately lose endorsement if you don't listen to them. So again, like the high D, you want to be very organized and to the point. And again, mistakes will kill you. So that's the 14 minutes of how to interpret and use DISC in communication. I do whole day workshops on this, but I offer to you, to anybody who'd like to get a free DISC assessment, which I think, Betty, you took me up on, just contact me. The point is you want to close more sales. You want to be closing relationships. You want to be on top of things. Again, whole day seminar in 15 minutes. I think I went over, but here's my contact information. If you would like to have an assessment done, send an email to answers@thehrguy.biz. And I will set you up, and we'll set up a time to debrief.
Yeah, we put some of those links in the chat here in online, and we got a couple more people in the waiting room here, and we'll let them jump in and maybe have some questions. Let's see here.
Okay, so let me stop sharing.
Here's Burke, and Alan.
Hey there.
Hey,
Saw you guys this morning.
Good.
Burke.
Oh, good. Did you see the presentation? You got questions for Russell?
I do. I've taken the DISC assessment before. What I was curious about is, so I go into a meeting. Here I am face to face with somebody. Is there any quick ways to tell whether they're a high D, high I, high S, or a high C?
Yeah, that's what we just presented, Burke. I'll be happy to set up a one-on-one to show you the presentation. I know you joined late.
No, I
But
mean, I got most of the presentation, but I mean, so I can tell because the high D is going to say, okay, get to the point, pick up the phone right away.
Right.
And the high I is going to be, hey, how you doing? I get that, but well, I guess maybe that's is that all there is to it? I mean, to recognize who I'm talking to when I walk in the room.
Yeah, you want to know what pattern to place them in. Ideally, you get the DISC profile ahead. I give away a lot of DISC profiles to prospects because when I know their style, I know how to speak to them, and I am much more likely to get them as a client. So you're absolutely right, Burke. You go through the points in the presentation, and you create a landing strip for each of the 4 personality types, and then you shift to that landing strip.
Yeah.
Just because you're over here on this landing strip, if you're not on the same landing strip, you're not going to communicate. So those are kind of the tips you picked up on.
Okay.
Cool. Well, yeah, it is. It's important to understand how the person's going to receive what you have to say. I think that's the biggest deal for me as a communications person. Is like you said, Russell. It's on the presenter to make their point effective, but it's not going to land where you want it to land unless you understand who's listening. So that's really the job: is who's your audience and where are they coming from.
When I do a lot of assessments for employment purposes during the selection process, when I send the invitation for the assessment, if they don't respond, then I know something went wrong, probably on the send. So I'll call my client and say, hey, I sent this invitation to Burke 3 days ago. They haven't responded. Did they get it? And sometimes I have a typo in the emails. And then they didn't have an opportunity to not do it. So you don't rule people out until you're sure your communication is received.
Right. Right.
You ever see that old Lucy in I Love Lucy, where every time Ricky got upset, he just talked faster and louder in Spanish? And it didn't communicate any better. And that's just like communicating in the wrong style to the folks who need to hear it their way.
Right. Right. Well, I'm getting text messages asking me to move my car in like the next 12 minutes, but I think we're good.
Don't get towed.
No, I'm not getting towed. I'm blocking one of my housemates from getting out of the driveway, and she has to go to a physical therapy appointment. So I'll take care of that. But anyway, yeah, I like that presentation a lot, Russell. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. What about you, Alan? Have any questions?
Well, Russell, I just want to say great presentation. I'm real curious on which, I'm probably putting myself under the bus, which category I fit in, because I definitely realized that I have a kind of a bold personality, but I love the very fact that when you said that certain individuals want to get right to the point, I have to adjust myself. So you're bringing back definitely memories from when I worked at a hospitality, taking reservations, and I realized I wasn't at the hotel. That sent all kind of players up to the conversation, so I had to switch on the spot. But that was 20 years ago. So it was, great presentation. Definitely interested in getting this for myself as well as the clients.
You're probably around 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock on the wheel down in the high I section. But send me an email. I'll send you one. We'll confirm that. No charge.
Thank you.
Burke, you're probably closer to a S.
Closer to an S?
Yep.
No, I'm high D, high I, and a middle C, low S.
A low S. Okay. Well, your work is high S work. So you build in processes to help you do that.
Right. So I don't have to.
Yeah.
So what's your best
For all the
email,
high
Russell?
Ds who don't want to do the high S work. Yeah.
I'm miserable on the C. That's my lowest. Now, a low C is also a very creative, very spontaneous. The low C's they have a little bit of a lack of attention to detail and they make errors, but they're also not bound by convention. So if you want to rebel without a clue, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Roy, do you have experience with DISC? I think you said you did.
A little bit, yeah. But when I got my reading the first time, it wasn't real clear to me. In fact, I did it twice and it came out different both times. So I guess it's the mood you're in can affect the results. But Russell, did you say you had an email?
Yes, answers@thehrguide.biz. If
Answers?
you get different results, I would question the strength of the tool you're using. My concern is people go on the internet and they take free DISC profiles that aren't accurate. You typically, if you're over the age of 30, your behavioral style is not likely to change significantly.
I'm over the age of 30.
Yeah, I am too, a couple times.
Yeah, in each case it was DISC. When I first took it, and it was in a group setting, and then somebody said to me, "Oh man, if I knew you were that, I'd have never expected this." And then the next time I took it, it was different. So I thought, well, I don't know what happened the first time, but that's probably why I got that reaction. And so anyway, I guess the best thing is just to take it again.
And again,
Maybe I'll find out the real thing.
I don't know what system you use, but the free DISC profiles are basically parlor tricks.
But they're basically what?
Parlor tricks.
Parlor tricks. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you do it differently than most people? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what most people do. I know I use a validated system that's very scientifically validated.
Okay.
And
Well, maybe
it answers multiple. You'll be asked the same question multiple times, and it will test you for your adaptive and your natural style, your strength of style, your consistency in answering. And occasionally I get people that are so all over the board, it sends back unable to produce a result. So because they were trying probably to cheat the exam.
well, there's no point in that.
I totally agree. So again, I'm not demeaning whatever ones you took, but often if you have different results, one of them was probably not a validated.
Yeah, I don't think the first one was valid, but maybe the second one wasn't either. Who knows?
I'm going to stop my camera and mute myself and go move my car. I'll be back, guys.
All right, we're counting on it.
All right.
But yeah, Roy.
What other assessments are there, Russ, that you use? Is DISC really the only one that makes sense to you?
No, I've got a suite. I've got and I've got multiple reports. The DISC is one. I've got a sales success index. I've got a driving forces or motivational assessment, emotional intelligence assessment, acumen or talents assessment, and all those are being used by my clients in different ways. But all of them are from the same vendor who I have great faith and been with for 18 years.
Wow.
The motivational assessment called Driving Forces is really, unlike the DISC, I cannot project where you are. And often that's the one when people see it, they go, oh, okay, I don't understand. That doesn't sound like me. And then we go through some examples and sure enough, it is. I always tell people if they don't like the assessment, show it to somebody that knows them better than I do. And I had one prospect who didn't like their results. And I said, well, sure, just go show it to your wife. He called me a week later and said, you were spot on. I had some blind spots, and he hired me.
Yeah, your wife will always tell you the truth.
Well, I
Sometimes
think
you don't want to hear it.
Yeah, in a healthy relationship, you're right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I first heard about it, and then I ran into somebody else that, well, they knew about it, but they basically helped people overcome some of the things that happened to them in their early years that were keeping them from doing well in business, some mental hangups they had. So he wasn't really a disc-oriented guy, but he gave me another idea, and then the third time I took it, it was a different person again. Anyway, that's been my experience. I think this is good. I like to, I guess, when you're good enough at this, when you're on a group call like we're on today, you could figure out who everyone is within a relatively short period of time, so you know how to discuss with each person, and possibly mix all that together for the group discussion. I'm assuming you can get pretty good with this, and it can be very valuable.
Well, again, I use it a lot during my sales meetings. That when I walk in, when I get somebody on the phone, I try to put them on their place on the wheel. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. If you're in the middle of the wheel, you're really hard to read. But then I adapt and get a better communication. Now, in an employment situation, when I have an employee, we use this for selection. How close are they to what the job profile is benchmarked? Or if they have a performance problem and their natural and adaptive styles are very diverse, then they're probably adapting either positively or negatively, or they're not a good fit. So this often tells me why people are having performance problems.
Yeah, I'm sure once you get good at this, I'm sure that you can learn a lot of things quickly, which is very valuable.
Yeah, and I'm always learning by using them.
One of the first times I was exposed to DISC was in a ghostwriting project with a dental success coach who talked extensively about how much DISC had done for her in building her practice, both, for hiring her staff and for understanding what the patients needed in their communication style. And even her marketing was driven by DISC assessments. So it's a really brilliant system.
Yeah, I think it'd be really valuable for Zoom calls, especially if you only got one person. That gives you a better chance to really hone in on them quickly. And you only have so many minutes anyway, so you want to figure it out fast and find out if they're a prospect or a collaboration possibility with you, or if they're just wasting your time. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this method can help you do that.
So where in the hiring process are you saying you'd use this? So you're interviewing a half a dozen people. You're thinking, okay, I'm down to these three. Invest in the DISC assessment for those three, and then go from there.
Yeah, I like to make it non-discriminatory. You have to treat everybody at the same stage of the selection process the same way. You can't just give it to females. You can't just give it to men. You can't just give it to a certain group. You have to be across the board. So you don't want to do it. With my hiring process, when I coach people on the hiring process, you start with the applications, serious interview. Sometimes between the first and second interview, I have clients that request these, and that can help shape the second or third interview. And is it a knockout punch? No. It's one of 5 factors that I recommend people assess when they're selecting somebody. And then, how you weight those is up to each candidate. But you look at their resume, you look at the interview, you look at their assessments, you look at any background checks, and then you look at how they behaved in the whole process. And those are the 5 factors. Do I make this person an offer, yes or no?
Do many employees or potential employees come into the interview with here's my DISC report, here's my Myers-Briggs, here's my blah, 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 half a dozen different assessments? They all are.
I've never had that happen. I've never had somebody bring that to an interview.
I mean, I could see doing that myself, having have some of those. But speaking of Myers-Briggs, has that been debunked, or is that valuable?
I used to be a practitioner of Myers-Briggs, and it hasn't been debunked. It measures slightly different things, and they aren't behavioral. They're based on your preferences. Am I an introvert? Am I an extrovert? Am I a feeler? Am I a thinker? There's a lot of overlap, but they're not. They don't align 100%. Professor Briggs and Professor Myers ended up getting married, which was an interesting story, but it hasn't been debunked.
Yeah. Okay. I guess it was Snopes that got debunked. One of those, anyway. Something knows. What about? Have you heard of TAIS? TAIS?
No, haven't heard of that one.
That one's a friend of mine does. He's a management consultant. He does it with his clients, where it's all about attention. It's like where do you put your attention? Can you shift your attention? It's like a football quarterback. They're going to have a narrow external when they're in the huddle, and they come out of the huddle. They look at the field. Now their attention needs to shift to a broad external. So it says there's a narrow internal, a broad internal, a narrow external, and a broad external. And it's all about, this came out of some athletic thing where you needed to be able to shift your attention from one thing to the next. As if you're narrow internal and you're the quarterback and you're out of the huddle, you can't like look out and see your guy to catch the ball. So it's that kind of stuff. And but it applies in business in an interesting way, I think. I don't know. My friend's the expert on it. I'm not, but it sounded like
TAIS. TAIS.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to look into that.
It's kind of like attention dexterity, I guess. I don't know. Speaking of attention dexterity, how do you find working with people with like ADD or ADHD?
They tend to be high I's or high D's, a lack of attention to detail. However, if they are obsessive compulsive, that's often the downside of being a high C. So it can vary.
No. It seems like it's not really a disorder. It's more of a gift.
It can be if you're in the right
How do
role.
you run a company without it? 1 minute you're talking about PR, next minute your CFO walks in the door, the phone rings, it's a customer. It's like you got to jump around back and forth and all kinds of different things.
Well, I had one, he was chairman of the board, and he was a very high D. And he once made a statement to us. He said, don't ever hire anybody that's not a high D. And I said, then I don't want anybody who's a high D being my bookkeeper or an accountant, because they make high Ds make lousy accountants. Do you want incorrect financial reporting? He said, of course not. I said, well, you have to have a high C in that function.
Yeah, that
So
would make sense.
one is more valuable than the other. Depends on their role.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and any given quality can be called an attribute or a deficit, depending on where you are. And,
For sure.
like the person who answers the phone isn't necessarily the person who's deciding who to hire or fire that day. But it's the same skull that's holding those different people, so.
Well, again, you don't put a high D in a toll booth because they'll go nuts not talking to people.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I love using this and working with my clients to help them either select or manage people. And DISC, like you said, Burke, thank you for the question. It's just one of a dozen or so assessments that I can offer.
Yeah. Where do you come in mostly, Russ? At the hiring stage, or when someone's got an employee problem? I'm sure you handle the whole spectrum, but I'm just curious where the most of your work is.
My best users of this will use it during the selection process. And then as I'm coaching them on how to manage their people, we'll always pull up their DISC profile. We'll look at their motivational profile. If it's in a leadership position, we'll look at their emotional intelligence profile. If it's a sales position, we'll look at their sales skill index, and we'll see what's missing. And when we have turnover, 60% of turnover is based in bad hiring decisions. So if you want to eliminate turnover, you improve your hiring. And so when we have a misfit hiring a job, I'll pull up the profile and say, what did we miss? Oh, this is an engineer. He's a high I. Who the heck told him to go to engineering school? And actually had that conversation with a structural engineer once. He was from India, and he said, well, you don't understand. In my position in society, he didn't use the caste word, but he said, in my position in society, I've got to be a doctor or a programmer or an engineer. An engineer was the lesser of the three evils.
Right.
And he was a lousy engineer. Great guy, but a lousy structural engineer. And lousy structural engineers cause buildings to crash. Ask the folks in Miami.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's a really good point. I had a client who is a longtime friend now who is from India. His family told him, you have to be an engineer, period. He became one. He was really good. He did super well at Microsoft for like 20 years. And in the course of coaching, he realized that he was miserable. I mean, when I first met him, he was a miserable guy. I mean, he's brilliant, and wonderful person. And he decided to make a career change. He's right now in the middle of finishing his master's degree and going for what he really loves in life. So, the ability, I mean, and he's great as an engineer. I mean, he did amazing stuff, but he was not happy with it,
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
this one engineer of mine I've stayed in touch with, he was about to lose his job. I convinced him he wasn't a fit for the job. He quit before we fired him, and now he's in sales
Yeah.
and very successful. He's in
Yeah.
technical sales. He's in technical sales, not like selling cars, but he sells technical products really well.
Mhm. Right.
There's a recruiter named Lou Adler. I remember I used to belong to Tech, which is now Vistage, and
Right.
his quote I remember was, "What did he say? Hire smart or manage tough,
And
or manage tough. Hire smart or manage tough."
If you get the first one right, you don't have to do the second one.
Right.
What's that?
If you get the first part right, you don't have to worry about the second part.
Exactly right. Yeah, but if you blow the first part, then you better be tough. You're hiring an idiot. You've got to be tough on them.
well, I like the adage: hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
that was a mistake I was making back in the day. I'd hire them fast, then take forever to fire them, and it's like, oh god.
I'll bet you changed that one, Burke.
Yeah.
Well, I once had an attorney client, and he had a front desk receptionist that was total misfit, and he was paying her about $50,000 a year and not getting anything out of her. She wasn't showing up. She'd wander away from the desk. She'd go visit. She was late, and I said, "You pay her $50,000 a year." I said, "Give me $25,000. I'll do nothing for you, and you save half your money."
And you won't be a pain in the ass.
And the job will be just as good.
Yeah.
I said, "You get the same results, and I'll save you $25,000." He did not take me up on that. But I
Mistake.
convinced him he needed to replace the relationship, the receptionist.
I remember calling into my office one time from outside, and the receptionist answered the phone, and I thought to myself, "She's awful. This is unacceptable. Why don't we just go?" This is right about the time when these automated phone systems came into play, and we went with that. And I recorded all the messages, but it was like, "I'm meeting you at the door. Hi, you've reached Business Power Tools. I'm Burke Franklin. I'm the CEO. I'm going to get you who you want to talk to. If you got to buy something, push 1. If you want tech support, push 2. If we owe you money, click 3. If you owe us money, push 4. Something like that. If you want to finally get to me, push 8. But it was a big hit. I could send you the script if you want.
Selection's about ruling out people you don't want to hire. So if I'm hiring, for example, for a front desk position and they're late for the interview, they don't get an interview.
Yeah,
Most important thing for a front desk person is to be there when the doors are unlocked.
absolutely. Or early.
Well, yeah, I had a boss once that said on time is late, 10 minutes early is on
Yeah.
time.
That's
So,
right. I agree with that.
there's timekeepers and time benders. I don't want a time bender in a position where they're the ones unlocking the door.
That's
And
right.
and if they're late for the interview, guess what? They're going to be late for work.
Why would that change? Yeah, right. Well, I've heard a venture capitalist would take an entrepreneur out to play golf, probably mostly as an excuse to play golf, but still, if they're smart, they're watching how the entrepreneur plays golf, because you figure how you do one thing is how you do everything. And
Very
so
true.
if they cheat at golf, they're going to cheat. If they have bad behavior, you lose your good behavior after about 9 holes, I think, and then the real you. Yeah,
And then the garbage cans get dented.
yeah, right. Golf clubs fly, stuff like that. Balls are dropped when no one's looking, that kind of thing.
I
Yeah.
had became aware of one company that for high level positions, leadership positions, when the candidate was flying into the airport, they would put one of their recruiters in a chauffeur suit, black suit, hat, everything. They were a trained recruiter. They would show up and they would drive the candidate back to the office. Now it's undercover surveillance by far. And if the person was rude, if they chewed up people on the phone, if they were pushy, That person was this recruiter who was driving the vehicle would send that message out, and that person was already not hired.
Yeah.
Before they even got to the location, because then they turned on their presentation mode.
Yeah.
And going to dinner, there's an old story about Henry Ford, who took some people out to two candidates out to lunch and had dinner with them. And he told them at the end of the dinner, I'm going to hire you. I'm not going to hire you. And the person who didn't get hired, they said, why did you make that decision so quickly? Said, you salted your food before you tasted it. Now, that person was probably a high ass. They always do it the same way. But he also discovered that people who do that kind of thing don't wait for information to make decisions.
Yeah. I had a sales guy. I was hiring the VP of sales. I was looking for the poster child of this. This guy shows up, gold Rolex, diamonds on it, spit and polish shoes, suit, shook my hand, practically crushed it. But one of the part of the interview, I said, so tell me about a mistake you made and what'd you learn from it? And he goes, well, I don't make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, so what was my mistake if you asked me that question? I hired that knucklehead. So
that was a mistake. Yeah.
That was a mistake. It really was. And on many levels. Yeah. Oh, and we go out to lunch with him. He wouldn't taste the food, but he'd unscrew the pepper shaker, just dump pepper on his food.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
Well,
what is
I
wrong?
coach my clients during the selection process. If in doubt, don't. It's no different than when I coached my kids on dating. You're ruling out people you don't want to marry. You're not looking for people to marry.
So it's really a filtering out, not trying to select one. You're trying to get rid of them. It's kind of like venture capitalists who look at business plans and they try to kill the business plan, kill it. But it's still on their desk 6 months later. It's like, maybe I should write these guys a check.
Yeah.
Kind of the
Well,
contrarian.
I've worked with one venture capitalist who hired me after they invested in a company. They wanted me to come out to help them determine who to cut and not cut, because I used to do that for a living. I've probably laid off 15, 20,000 people in my career. If you ever see the movie Up and Away with George Clooney, that was me.
That's up in the air. Yeah, I figured that was you. Yeah, right.
That's what I did. I would fly in and do the layoffs. But with this venture capitalist, we did a suite of assessments, and I've sat in their staff meetings for about a month. And I said, you need to keep this one and get rid of these two bozos. And they did. I mean, I'm not bragging, but that's the kind of observation you need to make. In venture capitalists, angel investors, the most oxymoron in the world, other than like military intelligence. Not offending any veterans in the group, but the military is very interesting the way they make decisions.
Yeah.
Betty's laughing because she has some experience with that.
Yeah. My son's in the service. He's in the reserves now, but he was a Marine for 8 years. And yeah, it's just a kind of a known thing. This is the box we're in. This is how we deal with it, Yeah.
Betty, I've got a question you need to ask your son. Ask him if he's ever aware of any such thing as an ex-Marine, because Marines are never ex-Marines. And
No, there's no such thing as an ex-Marine.
There is one ex-Marine.
There's one?
There is one officially ex-Marine. Now, who knows who that is?
Go ahead.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Ooh, yeah.
He was officially excommunicated from the Marine Corps.
Well, and rightly so, I guess so. I mean, yeah.
Otherwise, thank your son for his service.
That's something that people who are not in military families don't quite get. Is like, I thanked him for his service once early on, and it was kind of quietly understood that this is something we do not say to one another. Yeah. We had a group of his buddies from the Marines up on Thanksgiving up at the ranch, and everybody knows, they're all wearing their T-shirts indicating their unit or whatever slogan. One of the female helicopter pilots was wearing one that said "Up yours," indicating that she lifts transport. So, but we don't go around thanking each other.
No.
It's like, this is what we decided to do. This is how we do it.
Yeah, it's a given.
But thank you. I'll mention that someone said that next time.
Ask him who the only ex-Marine ever is.
Yeah.
Interesting conversation.
Good to know. Yeah.
My dad used to say there's the right way, there's the wrong way, and there's the Navy way.
right. These are the regulations. This is how we're doing it, right? Yeah. Whether it's right or wrong, this is what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. My brother's a West Point graduate, and I know exactly where he's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you get the Army brats above. I mean, I served as a 13 Bravo, but my platoon sergeant was a Marine first, and then he got into the Army, and of course, with my personality back then, I'm 54 now, but I was 21 then, so you can imagine the younger version of Alan, the conversation we had. It was very really incredible. He says, "Okay, I'm gonna excuse you being an Army guy," and so I said, "Okay." So Marines and Army and Navy, we all have different personalities, but at the same time, I agree with you, Betty. It's more the sacrifice in the service, and so we're humble. And I always tell people I'm a veteran, but the ones who are no longer with us are the true sacrifice. So it's a very humbling experience to be a part of this group of individuals. And I learned a lot today, Russell. You've got me thinking about how I'm going to have a conversation with this. This needs. I hope it's recorded. I know it is. Greg and Roy and Betty always do a great job, but this is definitely one for the ages to share with the whole internet world, because there's a lot of, I say, confused individuals out there.
Well, send me an email and I'll send you the no charge assessment. So, but I do have to buckle into the next meeting. It's been a great honor to present to you guys and have this conversation. An honor and a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Good to meet you, Russell. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your service. Nice one, Burke.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we
Well,
go.
that was excellent.
Maybe a topic for the next meeting is, do they use DISC in the military? So I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
Probably not.
probably
They
not.
must figure out something like, how does somebody, you're going to go here and you're going to do that, and we want you over here.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They want the best. The people have the
Yeah.
natural aptitude to do that, so there must be something in there.
There's probably something, but I suspect it's not DISC. Because in some ways they don't care, right? So,
Yeah, well, but they want to have people doing things that they're going to be good at and effective at. Yeah.
well, I know if you wanted to fly, for example, there's going to be tons and tons of testing and assessments.
Oh,
and
yeah.
sorts of things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I once wanted to fly, and boy, oh boy.
And the other
They put
thing
me
is,
through it.
I've known a few people who said, well, you can join the Air Force, but there's no guarantee you'll ever get in a plane and fly it.
Or if
Yeah.
you do, you won't be in the pilot's seat.
Yeah. So
Right. Yeah.
there's a really good program on submarine service in England.
I'd fail that psyche eval right off the bat. No!
Yeah.
Hell no. God, going down a submarine?
Yeah, and one of the things was to become captain, right? And it was kind of a huge ordeal. But the thing is either you became captain or you never were on a submarine again. That was the thing. Is either you succeeded or you're out of the service, because they didn't want to have anybody on the submarine with with some complaints, right?
Right. Yeah.
Sounds
Well,
like
that would
the
make
guy that
sense.
wanted everybody to be a high D.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Have you guys ever been in a submarine? Like
I've
been
not
in
been in
a,
one that's been moving.
I've been in an Austin Mini. That's kind of close.
yeah, no. I was in Honolulu one time. There was a submarine. It was a World War II submarine tied up to a dock.
Yeah.
And I
I've
was
been
like,
in that. Yeah.
can we go in the submarine? And they said, sure, come on in. Climbed down into that thing and walked all around in it. Oh, God. I just imagined it filling up with water. Just like, get me out of here. It was just
Well,
claustrophobic.
I knew a guy who served in a sub during the Vietnam War, and he said the smell of it was just like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like you're under there. I mean,
That
he
makes
was like,
sense.
I was glad I was under the water because we weren't getting shot at, but it was horrible.
Well, I've got to run, so it's great to see you people.
Good to
Okay.
see
Well,
you.
See you again soon.
anyway, happy Friday, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care, and see you next week.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.